The letter arrived 3 days after they buried her husband in the hard Arizona ground. And when Lucia Langford read the words telling her that her younger brother had died of cholera 200 miles away in Santa Fe, something inside her chest simply stopped working. She stood on the porch of the ranch house her husband had built with his own hands, the paper trembling in her fingers, and the vast emptiness of the desert stretched before her like a mirror of what she felt inside. The sky was impossibly blue, the kind of blue that should have promised hope, but all she could see was the color of Samuel's eyes the morning he kissed her goodbye and rode out to check the fence line where the cougar had been spotted. He never came home. They found him at sunset, his horse standing guard over his broken body at the bottom of a ravine. Now this. Now Jacob. Her baby brother who had followed his dreams west to become a schoolteacher, who wrote her letters full of joy about his students and his small adobe home. Gone. Just gone, like smoke in the wind. Lucia's knees gave out and she sat down hard on the wooden steps, still holding the letter. The sun beat down mercilessly on her dark hair, and she didn't move to shade herself. She couldn't move. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders, her chest, her very bones, until she wondered if the earth might just open up and swallow her whole. Perhaps that would be a mercy. She didn't know how long she sat there. The sun moved across the sky, shadows lengthened, and still she remained frozen on those steps. Her neighbor, Martha Henderson, had been bringing food for the past few days, letting herself in through the back door, leaving covered dishes that Lucia couldn't bring herself to eat. The ranch hands her husband had employed had drifted away, knowing she couldn't pay their wages. The cattle would need tending soon or they'd scatter to the four winds. She knew all this, understood it logically, but she couldn't make herself care. The sound of hoofbeats finally penetrated the fog in her mind. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the rider who dismounted near the porch. Boots scuffed in the dirt, spurs jingling softly. "Madam." The voice was deep, careful, with a roughness around the edges that spoke of years under the desert sun. "I don't mean to intrude. Martha Henderson sent me, said you might need some help with the cattle." Lucia still didn't look up. "I don't need help. Respectfully, madam, I think maybe you do." Something in his tone made her raise her head. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His face was weathered but not old, maybe 30 or so, with eyes that were a warm brown and held something in them she couldn't quite name. Not pity. She couldn't have borne pity. Something else. Something like understanding. "I'm Quentin Zimmerman," he said, removing his hat. "I've been working the Henderson spread for about 6 months now. Martha said your husband passed recently. I'm real sorry for your loss, 3 days ago." The words came out flat, empty. "And my brother 2 weeks before that, though I only just found out." She watched something shift in his expression. He didn't offer platitudes, didn't tell her it would get better or that they were in a better place now. He just stood there, hat in hand, looking at her with those steady brown eyes. "That's a heavy load," he said quietly. Lucia laughed, and the sound was brittle and wrong. "I can't get up. I've been sitting here for hours and I can't make myself get up. My cattle are going to scatter and the coyotes will get them and I'll lose the ranch and I can't make myself care enough to move." Quentin was quiet for a moment. Then he climbed the steps and sat down beside her, not too close, leaving respectful space between them. He set his hat on the boards next to him and leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Then don't," he said. She turned to look at him, confusion breaking through the numbness for just a moment. "Don't get up," he continued. "Not yet. Sometimes the weight of things is too much to carry alone, so I'll sit here with you for a while if that's all right. And when you're ready to get up, I'll help with the cattle. or I'll sit here until tomorrow if that's what you need. There's no rush." Lucia stared at him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere offering something she hadn't even known she needed, not to fix it, not to make it better. Just to sit with her in it. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "No, madam, but I know grief. Lost my whole family to fever when I was 17, thought the world had ended." He looked out at the desert, squinting against the sun. "Took me a long time to learn that sometimes you just have to sit in it for a while before you can move forward." They sat in silence as the sun continued its journey west. Lucia found that having him there, this quiet cowboy who didn't demand anything from her, made the crushing weight on her chest a little easier to bear. She could breathe a little deeper. After a while, she found herself talking. "Samuel and I were married 5 years," she said. "We met in Tucson. He was buying supplies, and I was helping my mother sell her preserves at the market. He made me laugh. I hadn't laughed in so long because my father had just died and everything felt dark. But Samuel told me this ridiculous story about a chicken that followed him around his camp for 3 days, and I laughed so hard I nearly knocked over Mother's entire display." Quentin smiled slightly but didn't interrupt. "He courted me properly, came to Sunday dinners, brought flowers. When he asked me to marry him, he promised me a home, a good life, children. We built this ranch together. Every fence post, every board in this house, we did it together." Her voice broke. "And now he's gone and I don't know how to be here without him." "You don't have to know right now," Quentin said gently. "You just have to breathe. That's enough for today." Lucia looked down at the letter still clutched in her hand. Jacob was only 22. He was going to come visit this summer. He wrote me that he was thinking of proposing to a girl he'd met at church. Her name was Alina. Now he'll never propose to anyone, never have children, never grow old. Tears finally came, hot and fierce, streaming down her face. "How is any of this fair? How am I supposed to accept it?" "I don't think you are supposed to accept it, not right away. You're supposed to feel it first, all of it." She turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "And then what? And then you keep living, not because the grief goes away, but because you learn to carry it differently." Lucia sobbed then, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside her. Quentin didn't touch her, didn't try to comfort her physically, but he stayed right there beside her, solid and present, his mere presence a quiet anchor in her storm. When the worst of it passed, she found herself talking again, telling him about Jacob's childhood, about how he used to catch lizards and keep them as pets, how he'd always been the gentle one in their family, preferring books to roughhousing. She talked about Samuel's dreams for the ranch, how he'd wanted to build it into something they could pass to their children. "We never had children," she said softly as the sun touched the horizon. "We tried. We wanted them so badly. I lost 2 babies before they could be born. The doctor said maybe it just wasn't meant to be, but we kept hoping." She pressed her hand to her stomach, "And now that possibility died with him." "That's another grief on top of grief," Quentin said. "I'm sorry." The stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Lucia realized she was exhausted, wrung out completely, but somehow lighter than she'd been when the day started. This strange cowboy had asked nothing of her except permission to sit with her, and in that simple act had given her something precious. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not trying to make it better, for just sitting here." Quentin stood and offered her his hand. This time she took it and let him help her to her feet. Her legs trembled but held. "I'll tend to your cattle tomorrow if that's all right," he said. "Martha's expecting me back tonight, but I'll come by at first light. You should eat something if you can and try to rest." Lucia nodded. She felt hollowed out but no longer crushed. "All right." She watched him ride away in the gathering darkness, then went inside. The house felt emptier than ever, but she managed to eat a few bites of the stew Martha had left and crawl into bed. She didn't sleep well, nightmares chasing her through the dark hours, but when dawn broke, she heard the sound of someone moving around outside. When she emerged onto the porch, Quentin was already working. He'd rounded up the cattle that had started to drift and was mending a section of fence. He looked up when he heard the door and tipped his hat to her. "Morning, madam. I made coffee if you want some. Pot's by the fire." She did want coffee. She poured herself a cup and stood watching him work. He moved with easy competence, the kind that came from years of hard labor. After a while, she found herself walking over to help, holding boards steady while he hammered. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know. But I'd like to help if you'll let me." They worked together in comfortable silence, and Lucia was surprised to find that the physical labor felt good, grounding her in her body, in the present moment. When the sun was high overhead, she went inside and brought out some bread and cheese for lunch. They sat in the shade of the barn, eating and drinking water from the well. "Martha told me you've been drifting," Lucia said. "Working different ranches." "Yes, madam. Haven't stayed anywhere permanent since I left Colorado 5 years ago. Been moving around, seeing different country, taking work where I can find it." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "After my family died, I couldn't stay in the place where everything reminded me of them. I thought if I kept moving, the memories wouldn't hurt so much. Took me a while to realize the memories came with me no matter where I went. Does it get easier? It gets different. The sharp edges wear smooth after a time. You learn to remember the good things without the pain swallowing you whole. But I won't lie to you and say it stops hurting altogether. You just get stronger at carrying it." Over the next week, Quentin came every day. He never presumed, never stayed after dark unless there was work that absolutely had to be finished. He mended fences, tended cattle, fixed the loose boards on the porch. Lucia found herself helping more and more, needing the distraction of physical work. They talked while they worked, easy conversations about small things at first, then gradually deeper. She learned that he'd grown up in Colorado, that his father had been a rancher and his mother a seamstress. He had 2 younger sisters who died of the same fever that took his parents. He'd been the only one to survive, and the guilt of that had driven him from his childhood home. "I kept asking myself why I lived when they died," he told her one afternoon while they were repairing the chicken coop that had been damaged in a windstorm. "There was no answer that made sense. I was just the lucky one, if you can call it luck." "I understand that," Lucia said. "I keep thinking about how I almost went with Samuel that morning. I was going to ride out with him. But at the last moment I decided to stay and work on mending his shirts. Such a small decision. If I'd gone with him, maybe I could have helped. Maybe he wouldn't have fallen. Or maybe I'd be dead too." "You can drive yourself mad with those thoughts," Quentin said gently. "All the maybes and what-ifs in the world won't change what happened. I know. But knowing that doesn't make the thoughts stop." He smiled at her, and she noticed for the first time that he had a kind smile, one that reached his eyes. "No, it sure doesn't. But give it time. Eventually they come less often." Lucia found herself looking forward to his arrivals each morning. There was something steady about Quentin, something solid that made her feel less like she was going to fly apart at any moment. He didn't treat her like she was made of glass, didn't hover or fuss. He just showed up, day after day, and worked beside her. One evening, about 2 weeks after they'd met, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The sky turned dark and angry, thunder rumbling in the distance. Quentin was still there, having stayed late to help secure the barn doors against the wind. The rain came suddenly, a torrential downpour that soaked them both in seconds. "You should stay," Lucia called over the sound of the rain. "It's not safe to ride in this." Quentin hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the impropriety of staying overnight, but another crack of thunder and a flash of lightning decided him. They ran for the house, dripping water everywhere. Lucia brought him towels and one of Samuel's old shirts, then busied herself making dinner while he changed in the spare room. They ate at her small kitchen table, the rain drumming on the roof, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the windows. It felt strangely intimate, sharing this space with him, but also right somehow. "Tell me about your mother," Quentin said. "You mentioned her before but never talked much about her." Lucia smiled, remembering. She was strong. Had to be, raising 4 children mostly on her own while my father was away driving cattle. She taught me to shoot, to ride, to do figures well enough to keep household accounts. She wanted me to be able to take care of myself no matter what life brought. Sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. She died 2 years ago. Heart just gave out one night while she was sleeping. At least it was peaceful. Lucia traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I think losing her was the first time I really understood that everyone we love will leave us eventually, one way or another. I just didn't expect it to be so soon with Samuel and Jacob." "No one's ever ready for that," Quentin said. "No matter when it comes." They talked long into the night, the storm raging outside while they shared stories by lamplight. Lucia talked more about her childhood, about growing up in Tucson, about meeting Samuel. Quentin told her about learning to ranch from his father, about the year he spent in Texas after leaving Colorado, about the different places he'd seen in his wandering. "Don't you ever want to settle somewhere?" she asked. "Build something of your own." He was quiet for a long moment. "I did once. But after everything happened, it felt like there wasn't much point. Who would I be building it for? For yourself? Maybe. I guess I haven't felt much like myself in a long time." Lucia understood that feeling all too well. She didn't feel much like herself either these days. The woman she'd been died with Samuel on that rocky ravine. She didn't know yet who she was becoming. The storm passed during the night, and by morning the world was washed clean, the air cool and fresh. Quentin prepared to leave early, thanking her for the hospitality. "I'll be back later," he said. "Want to check on those cattle in the north pasture." "Quentin," she said, stopping him at the door. "You don't have to keep coming. I mean, I appreciate all you've done, but I can't pay you. I have almost nothing left and I don't want you working for free." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not working for free. You're feeding me lunch most days and I get to feel useful. That's payment enough. Besides, I like the company. You like listening to a widow cry and talk about her dead husband. I like talking to someone who understands grief. And you're not just a widow. You're Lucia. You're smart and capable and you make the best coffee I've had in 5 years of drifting. So yes, I like the company." Something warm unfurled in Lucia's chest at his words, something that felt dangerously like hope. She pushed it down quickly, feeling guilty. Samuel had only been gone 3 weeks. She shouldn't be feeling anything but grief. But as the days turned into weeks, she couldn't deny that something was changing. She still grieved, still had moments where the loss hit her so hard she could barely breathe. But there were other moments now. Moments where she laughed at something Quentin said, or felt peaceful working beside him, or caught herself looking forward to seeing him the next day. One afternoon, about a month after they'd met, they were sitting on the porch taking a break from repairing the corral when Martha Henderson rode up in her wagon. "Lucia, dear," Martha called, climbing down with her usual brisk energy. "I brought you some eggs and butter. And I wanted to tell you that the church social is this Saturday. I know you're in mourning, but it might do you good to see people, hear some music." Lucia automatically started to refuse, but Quentin spoke up. "Might be nice," he said casually. "Get out for a bit. I'll take you if you'd like." As friends, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just so you don't have to arrive alone. Martha beamed at him. What a thoughtful idea, Quentin. It's settled then. Saturday at 6. After Martha left, Lucia turned to Quentin. You didn't have to do that. I'm sure you don't want to spend your Saturday evening at a church social. Actually, I don't mind, and she's right. It might be good for you to see people. You've been isolated out here. I like being isolated. I know, but sometimes we need people whether we like it or not. Saturday arrived too quickly. Lucia stood in front of the small mirror in her bedroom, looking at her black mourning dress. It was the only nice dress she had now. She hadn't been to town since before Samuel died, and the thought of facing everyone's pity and curiosity made her stomach churn. When Quentin arrived in a borrowed wagon, cleaned up and wearing what were clearly his best clothes, he seemed to sense her anxiety. We don't have to stay long, he said as he helped her up into the wagon seat. If it's too much, just say the word and we'll leave. The church social was held in the town square of Springerville, with tables set up under the trees and lanterns strung between the branches. Music drifted through the warm evening air, a fiddle and guitar playing cheerful tunes. People milled about, talking and laughing, and Lucia felt painfully out of place. But Quentin stayed close, a steady presence at her elbow. When people approached to offer condolences, he subtly ran interference when the conversations went on too long or got too intrusive. When an older woman started listing all the eligible widowers in town who might be interested in taking over Samuel's ranch, Quentin smoothly excused them and guided Lucia toward the refreshment table. That was Mrs. Patterson, Lucia said, half laughing and half horrified. She means well but has no sense of propriety. Some people don't understand that grief needs time, Quentin said, handing her a cup of lemonade. They think a practical solution fixes everything. I don't want a practical solution. I don't want another husband. I just want Samuel back. I know. They found a quieter spot under a large cottonwood tree away from the main crowd. The music was still audible but not overwhelming. Lucia sipped her lemonade and watched the dancers, feeling a bittersweet pang. She and Samuel had loved to dance. You dance? She asked Quentin. Not well, but I can manage not to step on your feet too badly. I wasn't asking. I know, but would you like to? Lucia hesitated. It felt wrong somehow, dancing while in mourning, but another part of her yearned for it, for the simple joy of movement and music. One dance, she said. A slow one. Quentin led her to the edge of the dancing area, where they wouldn't be as conspicuous. When the fiddle player started a slow waltz, he placed one hand carefully at her waist and took her hand with the other. They moved together slowly, carefully, and Lucia was surprised by how natural it felt. Quentin was a better dancer than he'd claimed, guiding her smoothly through the steps. My mother taught me, he said, as if reading her thoughts. She said every man should know how to dance properly, even if he spent his days covered in dirt and horse sweat. Lucia smiled. Your mother was a wise woman. She was. She would have liked you. The song ended and they stepped apart. Lucia felt flushed, aware that people were watching them, but she found she didn't care as much as she'd thought she would. Let them talk. She danced with a friend. There was nothing wrong with that. They stayed another hour, making polite conversation with various townsfolk, before Lucia signaled that she was ready to leave. On the ride back to the ranch, they were both quiet, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the distant call of a coyote. Thank you for tonight, Lucia said as they approached her house. I know I was reluctant, but it was good to be around people again, and thank you for being there. It made it bearable. Anytime, Quentin said simply. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands warm and solid around her waist. For a moment they stood close together in the moonlight, and Lucia felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. She stepped back quickly, heart pounding. "Good night, Quentin. Good night, Lucia." She watched him drive away, then went inside to her empty house. But it felt less empty than it used to. Something was changing, and she didn't know if that was wonderful or terrifying. Probably both. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and conversation. Quentin continued coming every day, and their friendship deepened. Lucia found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone, fears and dreams and secret thoughts. He listened without judgment, offering his own vulnerabilities in return. She learned that he loved to read but rarely had access to books, so she lent him the few volumes Samuel had collected. They spent evenings reading passages aloud to each other, discussing the stories. It was during one of these evenings, about 2 months after Samuel's death, that Lucia finally admitted something that had been weighing on her. "I feel guilty," she said, setting down the book she'd been holding. "For being happy sometimes, for laughing, for looking forward to things. Samuel's only been gone 2 months and I'm already moving on. What kind of wife does that make me?" Quentin set his own book aside and leaned forward in his chair. "It makes you human. Grief doesn't mean you stop living, Lucia. Samuel wouldn't have wanted you to lock yourself away and be miserable forever. How do you know what he would have wanted? Because anyone who loved you would want you to be happy. That's how love works." Tears spilled down her cheeks, "But I feel like I'm forgetting him. The sound of his voice is already getting fuzzy in my memory. Sometimes I have to look at his picture to remember exactly what he looked like. It's only been 2 months and he's already fading." "He's not fading. He's becoming memory instead of present reality. That's different. And it's okay to remember him with love instead of just pain. It's okay to build a new life while still honoring the one you had." "Is that what you've done?" Quentin was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying to. Being here, working with you, talking like this, it's the first time in years I've felt like maybe I could have roots somewhere again. Like maybe I don't have to keep running from my grief." Lucia looked at him across the small space of her living room. Really looked at him. This man who had shown up when she needed someone most, who had sat with her in her darkest moments, who had made her laugh again, who had somehow become essential to her days. "I care about you," she said softly, the words almost frightening in their honesty. "More than I should, maybe. More than is proper so soon after Samuel's death, but I can't help it." Quentin's expression was serious, intent. "I care about you too. Have for weeks now, but I didn't want to say anything, didn't want to add any burden to what you're already carrying. I figured I'd just keep showing up and being your friend for as long as you needed that. And if I need more than friendship, then I'm here for that too, but only when you're ready. There's no rush, Lucia. I'm not going anywhere." She stood and crossed to where he sat, reaching out to take his hand. He stood too, towering over her, his hand warm and calloused around hers. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever feel ready, but I know that when I'm with you, the world feels less heavy. I know that you make me want to keep living, and I think that's worth something." "It's worth everything," Quentin said, and gently pulled her into his arms. Lucia let herself be held, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap and sunshine. It felt different from Samuel's embraces, but not wrong, just different. A new thing, not a replacement for the old. She tilted her head back to look at him and saw in his eyes the same mixture of hope and fear that she felt. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Me too." "Of what?" "Of losing someone again. Of caring too much and having it all torn away. But I think maybe being afraid means it matters, and things that matter are worth the risk." Lucia rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and tentative. Quentin responded carefully, one hand coming up to cup her face with such gentleness it made her chest ache. The kiss was sweet and unhurried, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Both breathless, Lucia rested her forehead against his chest. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said. "I didn't plan to, I didn't think I could, but I am." "I'm already in love with you," Quentin replied. "Have been for weeks. I was just waiting for you to catch up." She laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. "Arrogant cowboy." "You're arrogant cowboy if you'll have me. I'll have you. But slowly. I need time to figure out how to do this, how to move forward without feeling like I'm betraying Samuel's memory. Take all the time you need. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." They stood together in the lamplight, holding each other, and Lucia felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. As summer turned toward fall, their relationship deepened. Quentin officially moved into the small foreman's cabin on Lucia's property, which gave him a place to stay while maintaining propriety. He worked the ranch with renewed purpose, no longer a drifter but a man building toward something. Lucia found herself dreaming again, imagining a future that included more than just survival. They took things slowly, mindful of Lucia's grief and the town's gossip. But anyone with eyes could see that they were in love. The way they moved together, worked together, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. One October afternoon, about 5 months after Samuel's death, Lucia was in town buying supplies when she ran into Martha Henderson again. "Lucia, dear, you look wonderful," Martha said, genuine warmth in her voice. "I mean it. You have color in your cheeks again, life in your eyes." "I feel better," Lucia admitted. "Most days anyway. I still miss Samuel. I don't think that will ever completely go away." "Of course you miss him. He was a good man and you loved him. But love doesn't die with the person, it transforms. And it's clear to anyone with eyes that you and Quentin have found something special." Lucia felt herself blushing. "People are talking, I suppose. Let them talk. You're not doing anything wrong. You're building a new life and you deserve happiness. Samuel would want that for you. That's what Quentin says. Quentin is a good man. Smart too if he recognized what a treasure you are." Martha patted her hand. "Don't let the gossips make you feel ashamed. Hold your head high and live your life." That conversation stayed with Lucia. That evening, she and Quentin were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she brought it up. "Martha thinks we should get married," she said. Quentin went very still. "What do you think?" "I think I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I think I want to build something real and lasting with you. I think I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. But I also think some people will judge me for moving on so quickly." "And I think those people don't matter," Quentin said firmly. "What matters is what you want, what you need, what makes you happy. If you're not ready for marriage, I can wait. If you never want to marry again, I'll still stay. But if you do want to marry me, I'll stand beside you and face down anyone who dares to criticize." Lucia turned to look at him fully. "Are you proposing to me?" "Not officially. Not yet. When I propose, I want to do it properly. But I'm saying that I love you, Lucia Langford. I love you with everything I am. And whenever you're ready, however you want to do this, I'm with you." "I love you too," she said, reaching for his hand. "And I think I am ready. Not right away, but soon. I want to make this official. I want to start the next chapter of my life with you." Quentin kissed her hand, his eyes bright. "Then that's what we'll do." 2 weeks later, on a cool November morning, Quentin took Lucia riding up into the hills above her ranch. They rode to a high point where the view stretched for miles, showing the vast Arizona landscape in all its rugged beauty. There, with just the two of them and the endless sky, Quentin dismounted and helped Lucia down from her horse. "I don't have much to offer you," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I've been a drifter most of my adult life. I don't have money or land of my own. All I have is my love for you and my promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings. But if you'll have me, Lucia, I swear I'll spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my mother's. It's the only thing I kept when I left Colorado. I was saving it, thinking maybe someday I'd find someone worth giving it to. You're that someone. You're everything. Lucia Langford, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Lucia's face, but they were good tears, healing tears. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Quentin slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "I never thought I'd be happy again," Lucia said, touching his face. "I thought that part of my life was over. But you showed me that happiness doesn't end just because one chapter does. You showed me that love can grow again, even in the hardest soil." "You saved me too," Quentin said. "I was lost before I found you, just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to stop running, to put down roots, to believe in a future again." They married in early December, a small ceremony in the same church where Lucia had married Samuel. Some people whispered about the short mourning period, but most of the town showed up to celebrate with them. Martha Henderson cried happy tears, and even the stern-faced pastor smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife. The ranch became truly theirs, built on the foundation Samuel had laid but growing into something new. Quentin had a gift for ranching, and under his management the herd grew. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men who needed work, and the place thrived. That first winter together was cold but joyful. They learned each other's rhythms, figured out how to share space and decisions, built the patterns of married life. Lucia kept a photograph of Samuel on the mantle, and Quentin never asked her to remove it. He understood that honoring her first husband didn't diminish what they had together. "He was part of making you who you are," Quentin said once when Lucia worried about how he felt about Samuel's picture being so prominently displayed. "I'm not threatened by him. He loved you and you loved him, and that's good. That's how it should be." "You're a remarkable man, Quentin Zimmerman." "I'm just a man who knows how lucky he is." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, the garden Lucia planted began to sprout, and Lucia discovered she was pregnant. The news brought mixed emotions. Joy and hope, certainly, but also fear and the bittersweet memory of the 2 babies she'd lost with Samuel. Quentin held her when she told him, understanding without words all the complicated feelings swirling inside her. "We'll hope for the best," he said. "But whatever happens, we'll face it together." Lucia clung to those words through the anxious months that followed, but this pregnancy was different. She felt stronger, healthier. The doctor in Springerville examined her regularly and pronounced everything normal. As her belly grew, so did her hope. On a blazing hot day in August of 1886, Lucia gave birth to a son. The labor was long and hard, but when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Lucia wept with joy and relief. "He's perfect," she breathed, counting tiny fingers and toes. Quentin sat beside the bed, looking at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. "What should we name him?" Lucia had been thinking about this for months. "Samuel," she said softly. "Samuel Quentin Zimmerman, to honor the past and celebrate the future." Quentin's eyes grew damp. "That's perfect." Little Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who quickly became the center of their world. Watching Quentin with their son filled Lucia with a contentment she'd never imagined possible. He was a devoted father, patient and loving, singing silly songs and walking the floor at night when Samuel cried. The months turned into years. The ranch prospered. They added more land, more cattle. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Lucia had a daughter they named Rose. 3 years after that, another son they named Jacob, after Lucia's brother. Their home filled with noise and laughter and life. Lucia still thought about her first husband sometimes, especially on the anniversary of his death or when something reminded her of him. But the sharp pain had indeed worn to something softer, bittersweet but bearable. She loved Samuel Langford for what they'd shared, and she loved Quentin Zimmerman for everything they were building together. Both loves were real, both valid, both part of who she was. One evening, about 8 years after they'd married, Lucia and Quentin sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was 9 now, tall and serious like his namesake. Rose was 6, wild and fearless. Little Jacob was 3, curious about everything. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Lucia asked. "When you showed up here and I was sitting on these steps, unable to move?" "I think about it often," Quentin said, taking her hand. "I think about how close I came to not stopping, to just leaving you alone with your grief. Martha had to talk me into coming because I didn't think I could help. I was just a drifter with nothing to offer. You offered exactly what I needed. You didn't try to fix it or take it away. You just sat with me in it. Sometimes that's all grief needs. Someone to sit with you until you're strong enough to stand again. You did more than that. You gave me a reason to stand, a reason to keep living." Lucia squeezed his hand. "You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Quentin corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. Maybe more." Samuel called out from the yard, asking his father to come see something he'd found. Quentin kissed Lucia's cheek and headed down to see what treasure his son had discovered. Lucia watched them, her heart full almost to bursting. The grief that had once threatened to destroy her had transformed into something else. Not gone, never entirely gone, but integrated into the fabric of her life. It had made her stronger, more compassionate, more grateful for the good things. It had led her to Quentin, to this life, to these children. She thought about the young woman she'd been, sitting on these very steps, crushed under the weight of loss. If she could go back and speak to that woman, she would tell her to hold on, that the darkness wouldn't last forever, that someone was coming who would sit with her through it, who would help her find her way back to the light. But she couldn't go back, and maybe that was okay. That woman had found her own way forward, one painful day at a time, with the help of a cowboy who understood that sometimes love means just showing up and staying. As the years continued to pass, the Zimmerman Ranch became known throughout Arizona as one of the finest cattle operations in the territory. Quentin's steady management and Lucia's sharp business sense proved to be an unbeatable combination. They employed several ranch hands full-time and were known as fair but demanding employers. Their children grew healthy and strong. Young Samuel showed an early talent for handling cattle and horses, working alongside his father whenever he was allowed. Rose had her mother's fierce intelligence and her father's steady calm, a combination that served her well. Jacob was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book when he wasn't required to do chores. One spring evening when Lucia was 35 and Quentin was 41, they attended a church social in Springerville. It had been over a decade since that first social they'd attended together, when Lucia was still deep in mourning and Quentin was just beginning to hope she might feel something for him beyond friendship. Martha Henderson, now in her 70s but still spry, pulled Lucia aside. "Look at you," Martha said warmly. "Look at the life you've built. 3 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, a husband who adores you. I knew when I sent Quentin to you that day that something good would come of it." "You sent him?" Lucia asked, surprised. "I thought he volunteered." Martha's eyes twinkled. "I might have done a bit of both. I saw how lost you were, and I saw how lost he was. 2 lost souls seemed like they might do well together. I'm glad I was right." Lucia hugged the older woman. "Thank you for everything. You've been like a mother to me since I lost my own. And you've been like a daughter." Now go dance with that handsome husband of yours. Life is short and joy should be celebrated." Lucia found Quentin talking with some of the other ranchers, discussing cattle prices and the possibility of a railroad spur coming through the territory. He looked distinguished now, silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. To her, he was more handsome than ever. She slipped her hand into his, and he immediately turned his attention to her. "Dance with me," she asked. "Always." They moved together on the dance floor with the ease of long practice. Over the years, they danced at countless socials, always together, always in step. "Martha told me she sent you to me that first day," Lucia said, "that it wasn't entirely your idea. It was her suggestion, but I was the one who decided to stay," Quentin replied. "The moment I saw you sitting on those steps, looking so lost, something in me recognized something in you. We were both grieving different losses, both trying to figure out how to keep living. I sat down with you as much for myself as for you. And now look at us. Who would have thought that day would lead to all this? I hoped. I didn't dare believe, but I hoped." After the social, they rode home together in their wagon, comfortable in companionable silence. The desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. When they arrived home, their oldest son Samuel was still awake, reading by lamplight in the living room. "Children asleep?" Lucia asked, finally. Rose wanted 5 more stories, and Jacob insisted he wasn't tired until he fell asleep mid-sentence. Samuel grinned. "They're a handful. Just wait until you have your own," Quentin said, clapping his son on the shoulder. "Not for years yet, I hope," Samuel said. "I'm only 16. I've got ranching to learn before I think about anything else." After Samuel went to bed, Lucia and Quentin sat on their porch, a ritual they'd maintained for years. This was their time when the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet to simply be together. "I was thinking today about grief," Lucia said. "About how it never really leaves you, but it changes shape. I still miss Samuel Langford sometimes. I still wish Jacob could have met his nieces and nephews. But the pain of those losses doesn't consume me anymore. It's just part of who I am, part of my story." "Grief is love with nowhere to go," Quentin said. "That's what an old rancher told me years ago before I met you. At the time I thought he was crazy, but I understand now. We grieve because we loved. And that love doesn't die just because the person does. It becomes part of us, shapes us, makes us who we are." "You've become quite philosophical in your old age," Lucia teased. "I've had a good teacher." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You taught me that it's possible to honor the past while building a future. That loving again doesn't mean forgetting. That joy and sorrow can exist in the same heart." "We taught each other," Lucia said. "That's what partnerships are supposed to do." They sat together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of wind through the sage. 2 people who had found each other in the depths of grief and built something beautiful together. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Lucia and Quentin's children grew into adults. Young Samuel took over more and more of the ranch work, showing the same dedication and skill his father had. Rose, against all expectations and traditional roles, showed a remarkable talent for horse training and began breeding and training cutting horses that were sought after throughout the territory. Jacob surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, following in his uncle's footsteps, opening a small school in Springerville. Lucia and Quentin became grandparents, first when Samuel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county and had twin boys, then when Rose married one of the ranch hands and had 3 daughters in quick succession. Jacob married a fellow teacher, and they had a son and a daughter. Through it all, Lucia and Quentin remained partners in every sense. They worked together, laughed together, faced challenges together. There were hard times, years when drought threatened the cattle, a terrible winter when they lost part of the herd to cold, a prairie fire that came dangerously close to their home. But they weathered every storm side by side. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration. The entire town of Springerville seemed to show up, filling their ranch with music and laughter. Lucia stood beside Quentin, watching their grandchildren play, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "If someone had told me 20 years ago that this would be my life," she said softly, "I never would have believed them. I was so lost, so broken." "We both were," Quentin said, "and we found each other. Or maybe Martha found us for each other." Martha was still alive, though frail now, sitting in a place of honor with a blanket over her lap. When Lucia caught her eye, the old woman winked. That night, after everyone had gone home and the ranch was quiet again, Lucia and Quentin sat on their porch one more time. It was their place, their ritual, the space where they'd shared so many conversations over the years. 20 years, Lucia mused. It's gone so fast. And we have so many more ahead of us, Quentin said, ever the optimist. I hope so. I want to grow old with you, see our grandchildren have children of their own, watch the ranch continue to thrive. Then that's what we'll do. Lucia took his hand, the same hand that had pulled her to her feet on that dark day so long ago. His hands were rougher now, marked by years of hard work, but they were still strong, still steady. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for that first day, for sitting with me when my grief was too heavy to bear, for not trying to fix it or take it away, but just being present with me in it. You thank me every day by being you, by loving me, by building this life with me." Quentin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You saved me just as much, Lucia. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family. You gave me everything I'd lost and more. We saved each other." "Yes, we did." They sat together as the stars came out, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and created light together. The grief that had brought them together had been transformed into something beautiful, something lasting. It was still there, woven into the fabric of who they were, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had made them stronger, more compassionate, more grateful for every moment of joy. Years continued to pass. Lucia and Quentin grew older together, their hair silvering, their steps slowing, but their love never dimming. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin having children of their own. The ranch passed to their son Samuel, who ran it with the same dedication his father and mother had. On a spring morning when Lucia was 62 and Quentin was 68, they rode out together to the hills above the ranch, to the same spot where Quentin had proposed all those years ago. They didn't ride as fast as they once had, and mounting the horses took a bit more effort, but they still went, maintaining a tradition they'd kept for decades. "You remember what you said to me here?" Lucia asked as they stood looking out at the vast landscape. "I said I didn't have much to offer except my love and my promise to stand beside you, and I asked if that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything." Quentin put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side as she had for so many years. "I think about Samuel Langford sometimes," Quentin said. "I wish I could have met him, thanked him for loving you so well. Because the woman he loved and lost became the woman I found and loved. We're both better men for having known you." Tears slipped down Lucia's cheeks, but they were good tears. "He would have liked you. You're both good men, just in different ways. I was lucky enough to be loved by two extraordinary men in one lifetime. Not everyone gets that. And I was lucky enough to find you when we both needed finding." They stood together in the spring sunshine, two lives intertwined, two stories woven into one. The grief that had nearly destroyed Lucia all those years ago had become the foundation of something beautiful. Because Quentin had understood that sometimes love means sitting with someone in their darkest hour, not trying to drag them into the light but simply being present in the darkness, until they're ready to move toward the light themselves. As they rode back to the ranch, Lucia thought about all the years ahead of them, however many they might be. She thought about their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the legacy they were leaving behind. She thought about the love that had saved her, transformed her, made her whole again. And she gave thanks for the day a cowboy with kind eyes had climbed the steps to her porch and said, "Let me sit with you through it." Those simple words had changed everything, had given her back her life, had led to more joy than she'd ever imagined possible. The ranch came into view, home in every sense of the word. Their son Samuel was working in the corral with one of his sons. Grandchildren played in the yard. Smoke rose from the chimney where their daughter Rose was probably cooking dinner for the family gathering they had planned for that evening. "Home," Quentin said simply, voicing what Lucia was thinking. "Home," she agreed. And as they rode into the yard, surrounded by the family they'd created together, the life they'd built from grief and hope and love, Lucia knew that her story had found its happy ending. Not because the grief had disappeared or the loss had been erased, but because she'd learned to carry it differently, to let it make her stronger instead of breaking her. The cowboy had sat with her through the darkness, and together they'd found their way back to the light. And that light had only grown brighter over the years, illuminating a life full of love, purpose, and joy. This was their happily ever after, earned through patience and understanding, and the simple act of being present for each other, day after day, year after year. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Lucia and Quentin walked into their home hand in hand, ready for whatever the evening and the years ahead might bring, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. Their love story had begun in grief, but it had bloomed into something magnificent, a testament to the healing power of presence, of patience, of two broken souls choosing to be whole together. And in the end, that was the greatest love story of all.